Dr. Pramod Varma, co-founder and chief architect at Networks for Humanity and former chief architect of India's digital public infrastructure, including Aadhaar, UPI, and DigiLocker. In this fireside chat, Dr. Varma will share insights on how open digital ecosystems can enable inclusion, interoperability, and trust at global scale. Please welcome Dr. Pramod Varma.
Hello. Oh, thank you, Pramod.
Morning.
So afternoon and morning. So I'm really privileged, and so we must be to have Pramod here. Given the impact he has created in DPI infrastructure. So like Nikki mentioned, Pramod is right now co-founder and chief architect of Network of Humanity and former chief architect of India DPI initiatives, which has created infrastructure with millions of billions of impact. And now Pramod is creating some moonshot projects, which we'll talk about.
Of course.
And we'll dive into what we are expecting in DPI motion down the line. So to begin with, and to set context, and given the whole world is witnessing very, very fast movement in digitization around using AI and multiple tools, what's your vision of what is DPI now? How do we define it? And what is it going to be in next 5 years?
I think there's a large, this is what happens, when the term gets popular,
right?
Everyone wants to figure out what it is, and you try to put your arms around it by defining. And then definition doesn't go anywhere, and it gets very hard. But in the essence, what it was to create public infrastructure with private innovation on top. And I think if you can get that combination, what we saw with internet is a great example of protocol-driven, standards-driven, open infrastructure for humanity, and then a slew of private innovation that eventually unlocked value in people's life. Internet itself doesn't unlock any value. Infrastructure by itself is, for technologists, it might be cool, the design of it, but for most people, they don't care. Unless they can now start ordering food or cab or whatever you want to do on top of it. And that's what private innovation did. So DPI was essentially the same thing, pushing further into economics on internet. Internet itself was open, but the economy on the internet was very closed. So we wanted to push that boundary and to say, can we now decentralize identity? Can we create attestations and credentials? I think many conversations happened here, verify and give it back to the user. And then we said, how can flow of money become essentially free? And that's what India's payment infrastructure that last month, 2 months ago, we were largest in the world, right. Even larger than Visa. It does 20 billion plus transactions a month. So very, very large, 15 billion APIs a day, very large infrastructure, but literally collapsing the cost of transactions, cost of interactions and transactions in the society. But what is interesting is that it's not about creating free stuff. It's about creating the underlying fabric being free, but then you allow private innovators to unlock variety of value on top of that. What you do with it is left to the entrepreneurs.
Right.
So DPI, there's no change in that attitude even when it comes to AI, when it comes to agentic, or when it comes to, whether it's in payment world or in AI world, you end up asking the same question. Are we going towards a reasonable, vibrant market economy, or is it going to be highly locked into few monopolies, large players, unequitable share of the whole thing? Then you start asking the DPI question. You say, what can we do to unbundle some of that and create much more open public infrastructure so that we can have hundreds of more AI entrepreneurs and thousands of them creating value for people.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that keeps on breaking record every month, now and then, there and also global.
Of course, yeah.
And to do that, we need very, very smart people to be involved in DPIs. I mean, private companies can come, like you told, to build on the base and on base of the fabric.
Base.
But what your learning has been how to motivate really smart people and bring them from some of the top commercial companies from
Yeah.
around the world to join initiatives and
Yeah.
contribute to DPIs.
Yeah.
How do you feel it can be done again and again in other geographies?
That's frankly, that's hard. I don't think it's easy to, when you create large scale public infrastructure, especially ones which has no tokenomics working out, right? There's nothing there. Then the only way to inspire them is on the impact of it and the mission. So you can inspire them through the mission and the impact it can create. But it typically lasts very short. So people can, for example, quit and join. People like us who quit commercial world. Most people would go back after 3 years or 2 years, 3 years, go back to their commercial world. So if you can find a way that you can attract even for shorter sprints, year, 2 year sprints, for people can come in and then, they feel very satisfied. And when the project gets successful, it gets very satisfactory as a human that you impacted 1 billion plus several billion people. And that's a good thing. And if you can do that sprint-wise, you can attract people. For long term, you can't attract. It's very hard without the, some sort of commercial or some benefit coming out of it. And another way to do is also inspire people to come in to build public infrastructure, short sprints, but allow them to go build apps on top of it or platforms on top of it. So they can still derive value, other economic, commercial value.
There's some leverage.
Some leverage out of. For example, you can build payment infrastructure as a public good, but then you go build a fintech company or a investment company or capital market fintech, some sort of a fintech company to now completely derive value out of it. For your own, not only you, for your own shareholders and employees and so on.
That totally makes sense. All right. And that's where we can probably invite more talented people.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, that's about DPI and how we can make it more and more practical and something which globally can be copied across other nations. I would love to get a bit of a zoomed in perspective on what's happening right now in your current projects.
Okay.
There are 2 projects happening which Pramod is running under. One is Fintech and one is Beacon.
Yeah.
So do you like to
Yeah, sure.
give a view on the moonshot we are trying to target?
Yeah.
Because a couple of things might be repetitions of in terms of jargons,
Yeah.
but some moonshot dreams which Fintech will realize given all the powers you have.
Yeah, and this very well connects with our experience of building digital public infrastructure with private innovation. In India, and I'm a co-chair at a Center for DPI. We work with about 40 to 50 countries around the world to actually help with digital public infrastructure. It's really hard to get to 190 countries, 8 billion people. It's just, we are going to be dead and gone. I mean, it's going to be long, short, because the capacity, capability, capital, all of them are actually highly constrained. And many places like Pacific Islands and all where we work with, they don't even have economy of scale. At least we have 1 billion people to play with, So it's not, Brazil, for example, find it easier. Smaller countries find it very hard to, like we work with Trinidad, Tobago, yeah, or Caribbean islands, really small. And so question we were asking is that, is it possible for us to create universal DPIs? DPIs like internet, it's there for everyone to use it. Now you can adopt at appropriate time and you can adopt with your own rules layered on top of it. But the infrastructure itself exists. If that works out, then at one shot, we can get the whole world to actually leapfrog. But come in their own terms and, adopt in their own timelines. Not everybody comes at the same time, and that's okay. But so to do a universal DPI, it can't be centralized because which country and who is going to control it? So we go back to the primitives. You go back to the same primitives. You have to be protocol driven, open, or protocol / standards driven, very open, decentralized. And so you go back to the same primitives, but you also have to apply, no, we should not come from, one of the things we were doing is not to take a technology first approach, rather a value first approach to figure out what tech exists and what tech doesn't exist. And if it doesn't exist, then we bring it to forums like this, to smart people, and say, can you please crack it? Because it's not for us to crack all the tech. Now, one of the subtleties about this is also the idea that regulators and sovereigns can have their own opinions and rules, and whether you like it or not. A regulator might say, like an Indian regulator might say, you can't transfer capital control norms, for example. Indians can't transfer beyond X amount of money per year outside the border. Now, we may not like it. We say, why not? It should be freedom and all that thing. But, that's how it is. That's how the world works with rules. And the rules can be physical rules on the road, or, digital rules laid by the nations that you live in. In Singapore, you have rules and you have to follow the rules. You can't just sort of say, I want to do whatever I want to do. So I think the question we were asking is that if we create decentralized, open, protocol-driven architecture, then how does supervision, regulation, sovereignty, data privacy and principles play out? It can't be all on public chains. It can't be all on private. So how does it all work out? So I think that's the reason why we started from first principles. Very much not from tech first principles design. And we have taken on under, so I'm part of something called the Networks for Humanity. Networks for Humanity is a global setup. It's a foundation that's set up globally. We have offices in US, Switzerland. It's just finishing up now. In Singapore, we have a lab, and India. And we have two missions. One, to convert all forms of economic assets into a token and give it back to the user. So user-controlled asset ownership. It's huge for us. And we are very, very, very committed to say, we must ensure in the long run, 8 billion people, 300 million businesses can own and transact in a verifiable and transactable way, we say. Because having assets is useless. And in India, we see this. Indian property market, for example. And we see this I work with African nations, LATAM, very much the same. Illiquid, non-transactable, or non-verifiable forms of assets. That's a very low-performing equilibrium we are leaving them into. So we want to convert that into a very notion that if every asset can be converted to a representation called token, that's self-describing, verifiable, and also transactable. Not only verifiable, but also with a ledger and transactable on top of it. And if you can give this control back to the user, we are going to unearth trillions of dollars of economy on top of it. Whether it comes from property, gold, materials, agri-produce, agri-receipts, for example, tokenization of agri-receipts, huge, because half the world is still agriculture. It's really, really big. Energy sector, we are seeing massive investment of energy assets. How are those assets going to be lendable and investable or tradable? The three things, right? Lendability, investability, and tradability. It doesn't come if it's living in the paper world. So that first mission is called Finternet. So that Finternet is a mission that we put out to paper 2 years ago, roughly 1.5 years ago. And we are a large community, and we have a Finternet effort. We have my colleague Vineet here, if you want to chat about, he drives a lot of engineering. You have been part of our community from early days. Thank you for doing that. It's a large community effort to reimagine an open asset tokenization play. It's not one product or one company. We expect many, many companies and many products to be evolved on top of that. But then comes the second vision. What is the use of having assets in your hand, which is verifiable and transactable, but cannot have an open exchange loop? That means today, much of the transactions, counterparty transaction, happens in a platform economy. That means I go list my assets in either Web2 style eBay or Web3 style marketplaces. And invariably, these marketplaces become the dominant intermediary for you. And that intermediary now is controlling who you can sell it to, who you can see, who has visibility to your catalog, if I were to say that. We are reimagining that play using, again, a decentralized, protocol-driven, decentralized marketplace. Think of that way. So if you have assets decentralized in your control, and if your marketplace is decentralized, we believe we can completely reimagine much more equitable way to bring much of the world into that. That the second vision is under beckon, beckoning a future. So that's a wordplay on the beckon, B-E-C-K-N. So if you search for beckon protocol, you will see it. Right? Actually, it's live. We do probably 1 million+ transactions every day already in the last 2 years. Across food delivery, we have food delivery networks, decentralized food delivery. We have decentralized taxi booking with no centralized platform in the middle. It's very powerful imagination of how consumer producer can actually transact, provided in both scenarios, we go back to the now foundations of how does trust get established? How does proofs get established? How does your claims get verified? Then we come running to you guys, many of your experts, to figure out what is the mathematics behind some of this. Because these are the two visions. We must decentralize all tokens and give it back to the user and create decentralized market economy.
That's a very beautiful picture. And that's something which I personally also feel that where typical blockchain community has made a mistake. They have been very, very tech fast. And they have been, which is good. So people work for a decade.
Frankly, I think it is, these are beautiful cycles, I think, Sometimes you just have to go through it to get to the right place. It's okay,
Yeah. So in that beautiful scenario, probably we are talking about a programmable control on the user side, which is a flip story.
Flips the story, yeah.
But that is realizable only if we enable and fix one problem, which the previous panel also talked, which is about how we also allow control on the data. It can be assets or different classes, but
of course,
there is a digital footprint of mine or all the citizens, and I have to have control on that. And that control currently is baked in consent.
Correct.
Everything is based on consent. We give consent, companies give consents, and it's all based on legal contract. So how do you imagine that you can enforce, you can have an auditable consent, verifiable consent? Do you imagine a world, at least in backend or Fintech now, that the consent and compute, which I mean users of that asset or data, will be connected? And how do you imagine that connection to happen? Right now it's fully disconnected.
Yeah. So just to explain, Fintech brings state. Beckon is stateless. It's an exchange protocol. Okay, remember. So it's an exchange architecture. Fintech brings state. Now, consent is an artifact. That did you give consent? Who gave consent? Did you give consent to what? How long that consent is valid, and so on. So you have to have the ability to describe the notion of the consent. You have to have a notion that it can be verified and audited if required, and a mechanism for revoking the consent and modifying that consent, because you never know, in the future you might have to modify the consent or revoke the consent. So if you have a mechanism to describe the consent and make it verifiable and auditable, and also have manageability, which is revocation, modification in the hands of the user, we have a good play to make sure. So we believe even consent will be tokenized. So the way Finternet is imagining is that the consent artifact itself will be tokenized into the user, and a counterparty gets a copy of the consent saying that, okay, I am giving you the consent, now you can transact, but I retain the control of the consent, and at any time I can, if it's revocable consent, if it's legally, and I can revoke it, I can modify it, I can pause it. And part of this is actually implemented in both our data sharing infrastructure in India and payment infrastructure, where the consents of recurring payments, for example, is fully controlled in India. The consent is not given to the accepting party or the requesting party. Requesting party, I'm not going to their website and requesting it. They are requesting me in my consent app, and where I give the consent, and I can always see my consents in one place, unified. Otherwise, half the time you don't even know where all I clicked, I agree. So we are unifying that in the hands of the user. And now you have the hope of actually giving manageability on top of that and auditability. Whenever the consent is used, I should get a notification. Typical GDPR-like compliance. If you use my consent, I have the right to get notified, and I have the right to subsequently cancel it, or revoke it, and modify it. So I think it is perfectly doable to create consent, but one of the dangers of consent is that there's a consent overuse, fatigue, right? And most people can't disseminate and read, and the previous panel talked about it. Most people just give consent because it's convenient, and it just gives me free pizza or whatever, and I'll just give it, take my phone number, whatever you want to do, right? I'm in the hope that they don't do harm. And if it happens, then I run to the regulator or to the legislative side of the country saying, please rescue me because these guys are screwing me. I didn't expect it. You might have given the consent. So there is a balance of what can be consented. Right. And that's also a good discussion today, right? Can you just consent saying that I'll give whatever I want? No, you can't. There is a limit to what you can consent and what you can, even if you get consent, companies can't. Just because I gave you consent doesn't mean you can't do random stuff. There are larger harm questions that needs to be answered systemically, not through consent. Consent cannot answer that. Right. And the third part of it is data. I think when it comes to data, it's today, I've been trying to unlock data, large-scale data around the world, data networks, data discussion, healthcare. For example, I've been working on the digital healthcare stack in India. Very, very hard to get data. Two reasons. One, providers of data or the holders of data is quite afraid of what will happen to them, especially healthcare and so on. Hospitals say, I would rather not take the risk. So you need a lot of legislative or regulatory clarity of what I can do and what I can't do, which is hard to come because these are almost always there's enough confusion there. So people don't make the move. And the second part is that once I give data, people can do whatever. There's no way to pull it back. Correct. And we have talked about many of your efforts in this community and your own company as well, has been where the algorithm goes to data and not data goes to algorithm. And can the data reside where the transaction occurred and not move around? Mm-hmm. And can you create insights that move around? And then it's still valuable. So there's a lot of cutting edge technology that all of you work on. We hope, people like us hope that somehow that alleviates today's concern that I am afraid of giving data and I have no incentive to give data. So double whammy. You're just simply doesn't unlock. And if you are an AI, health tech AI, you are literally begging and pleading for good data. How can hundreds of healthcare company, health tech companies come and actually help the society if they have no access to golden copies and good data sets? So it's been a conundrum, very hard. But if tech can solve that to alleviate these two pain, that means I am very clear what I'm sharing and not sharing. It's auditable, supervisable, monitorable. I'm not to be afraid. I don't have to be afraid. Second, I don't need to share full copy of the data. I can allow insights to be created on data. at one shot, I think I have a feeling that we can try bringing data marketplaces out.
Right.
And that's where even protocols like Beacon is very useful, because data marketplaces are going to be decentralized as well. So you will need decentralized mechanism to discover data sets, negotiate prices, and go to that data set and get insights out of it, rather than getting a copy of the data sets.
Correct. Yeah, their cryptography can help, which Nigel, Abhi, and multiple people talked.
Yeah.
We need to codify consent. Consent probably needs to be manifested in certain functions, and only those functions can be computed, nothing else. It's a hard.
So we,
hard
by the way, in India, we did create a structured consent artifact,
Like
but it
what?
was for a special purpose. I'm not sure if there is a generic way to create a consent artifact or not. It would be lovely if if the community can come up with one. We would all just jump onto it.
That's something. It's a hard problem, which is
But consent, remember, that's why when we say tokenized consent, Jay, we have to consent also need to include revocability built into it, and modifiability and ability to pause. Pause is another very important function that we need to think about. So the consent can be described and notified, managed, what do you call audited, and third managed. Managed means revocation and pausing. It will be very, very powerful contribution
Okay, yeah.
to a ton of things we are doing.
That's a good.
Otherwise, we'll cook up one until you have a better one. Yeah.
That's a good homework for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Take over and work
Very,
on,
very
right.
powerful homework. In fact, I wanted to propose a project. In fact, I was telling Vineet, my colleague, to maybe we propose under Linux Foundation, because we work closely with them, and the Decentralized Trust, LFDT. Maybe we can put up a project. If you're interested, we're happy to begin.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Worst case, nothing will happen. Can't get worse than where we are. So, we can attempt.
Yeah, and Hart is here. He'll be around as well.
Okay, excellent.
Right. So yeah, these are good homeworks for us and everybody else to work on. Taking a bit of a leap from where we are, and multiple companies globally who are leading AI effort, they are making prophecies of AGI happening in 3 to 4 years. I don't know when, but let's.
We don't know what AGI
happen,
is. That's
yeah.
a problem. Yeah.
That's also a definition which is
Yeah.
contested. But one thing which bothers me, and will like to understand your take on that, is when it happens, do you feel there will be a huge monopoly of some tech giants? And in that case, how DPIs will have to evolve? Because
Yeah.
DPI typically starts from government initiatives. It requires public understanding. In that case, yeah, how do you
Or
see
some
DPI
community
proceed?
initiative. It
Yeah.
can be government or community, open community. DPS, Ethereum is DPI. So in the sense, private innovation, public infrastructure, but community, math-driven, community-driven, not government-driven. That's okay too. That's perfectly okay too for DPI. It doesn't have to be government. Yeah, so AI topic is exciting. At the same time, you do worry about significant power concentration. And especially with AI, which requires enormous capability, which is the best brains, which they seem to concentrate into one place, and capital. So the capital is so large that only so many people can play the game. That's somewhat worrisome. But I think when we look at countries like India, or much of global south, and we have Africa AI project and India AI project right now going on, something that we are very, very excited about is how DPI and AI are actually quite complementary, very beautifully complementary. For example, India's payment, although we cross 20 billion transactions a month, larger than Visa network, only 550 million users use UPI. We have 1 billion adults and 1.4 billion people. So we still have nearly half the country yet to experience UPI. It's already very largest in the world, but you still have half the country. When you ask the question, why are they not getting? Of course, other than the first time fear and so on, much of that comes from their inability to interact with the computing environments. Smartphones, typing something, Nothing is natural to them. I think what we are seeing with both
Right.
voice-based tech and agentic tech is that suddenly, first time in the world, they're actually interacting with a computer as if they're interacting with a human being, which is so natural to them.
Yeah.
I can speak in my broken language, maybe mixed Hindi, mixed with English, mixed with some other language. Indians speak multiple languages and they all mix it up. It's called code mixing in AI. They mix words and numbers and everything else, okay? But, and grammatically wrong. Nobody is giving you structured, grammatically correct sentences. They just use casual words, incorrect grammar. But first time in our history of humanity, we are able to actually communicate with a computer with broken language.
Yeah,
So if you can, it's a extremely powerful notion that much of humanity their interaction with keyboard was the most geekish. Keyboard and VI editor, then you came to, somewhat better, then smartphones changed that to, at least my mother can now send a WhatsApp voice message. It's not so bad. She would never use a computer, but smartphones, not so bad. We are at that cusp of shifting human-computer interaction. And that's exciting because that's truly will take human-computer interaction to the next world. So it will supercharge all our efforts finally to reach the last person, right? To be able to actually transact every day, not just watch TikTok or YouTube, which I can do. Entertainment economy is very easy to get to, but transaction economy is very hard. They don't know how to fill up a form. They don't even know what that combo box or list, but what to select. We get confused half the time what I'm supposed to fill in that box. Imagine most people find it hard. I think that's very exciting. And the second part, which is exciting, is the DPIification of AI. Not AI on top of DPI. DPI approach to AI, which is your second question, part of the question. What part of AI can it be democratized? And so that we can have 1,000 more AI entrepreneurs having a go at it. At least today, they don't even have a go at it. The two parts we are democratizing very clearly and probably doable now is computing and data. If you can get democratized access to compute and data in a structured, of course, consented if it's private data. If this technology allows us to do that, we significantly reduce the arms race, the cost of running. Right. Today, entrepreneurs, the cost of running itself is so large. So, so I think we have done that for languages in India. We put out, community, philanthropic funded, and open source and academic community came together in India to put out all 22 languages. We have 22 constitution languages, by the way. All of them actually data sets, well curated data sets, and open source models, voice models, and OCR models, OCR, voice and text models into public domain. And then told entrepreneurs, now you look at voice-based payments or healthcare, telemedicine through voice, or whatever you want to do. The barrier of entry is being reduced. You don't have to pay so much for simple language models. You can democratize them. We are doing the same thing for Africa. I think we have about 12 languages I think we are starting with in Africa. And we are expanding that so that entrepreneurs can be AI driven. So you can apply DPI thinking into democratizing compute and data. Beyond that, it gets hard. I mean, there will be arms, there will be race that gets harder. But the other last question you asked is, will there be one mega model that dominates AGI in the world? First of all, AGI itself is unknown. I think Sam seemed to be redefining AGI, however they all want it. It's okay. It's all right. Some hype will happen. It's okay. But less to do with AGI. I think it will be a gradual, continuous upgrades to the system that we will see. What I'm hoping is that we will have hundreds of fine-tuned smaller models that allows us to be much more finesse, much more accurate rather than any hallucinations and so on, much more enterprise friendly, sovereign friendly. That means it's not everything is in one mega system. Because the sovereignty question, I was in Brussels and we were asking this question: can somebody shut a country down? And if countries, all transactions eventually go to one API call, two API calls, whether it's payment network, whether it's maps network, whether it's anything else. Today, the whole country's digital economy depends on these underpinnings, and this underpinning can be shut down because somebody has a bad relationship with some other country. It is worrisome. So I think it is, people are pushing that boundary to say, can we have many models that actually allow us to do. But even to get to the model, you need to democratize some layers of it. I think that achievable in healthcare. We are doing that now. Healthcare data sets we are doing. We are creating a lot of curated golden data sets and creating incentives to be able to do it. But I wish we should apply some of the techniques, because it's a very sensitive data. So data floating around doesn't help at all. So it would be good to have confidential computing and everything else that you're working on that can be used there. But if you don't democratize, there's no innovation. There's no innovation in healthcare. We have 1 billion people with unaffordable healthcare. So as simple as that.
That's a nice problem to have. Probably it looks like Beacon acting as a transport plus data marketplace.
Yeah.
Using some privacy tools to let it happen.
Absolutely.
Let orchestration happens, and having full control of consent and giving more power to the data owners, actual data owners, removing all data duplication.
And also you should, if there are methods that all of you are pushing, the boundaries of anonymization techniques, smarter ones than the traditional ones, very powerful. And the data, if the more data sets can be shared with less PII data or no PII data, it gets easier for some of that sharing regime to come alive. Personal data becomes very, very scary for people. So it gets almost always locked.
And also, at multiple times, there are competing interests.
Competing interests.
When you join a network, when you create a network, there might be similar personas of companies or individuals having similar fear of data exploitation.
Of course, yeah.
And that's where these two.
If data doesn't have to move, and even if you're moving, it can move in a privacy-preserving manner. That unlock is unquantifiable.
Yeah, and that's
absolutely.
Yeah, and that's the whole context. What we have been talking today, and we'll be talking more and more over the conference.
All the best, and look forward to a lot.
But in general, it's very lovely always to listen to you.
No, they're wonderful to be here. I was in Singapore, so thank you for inviting me to come around, and thank you for taking time, all of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Yeah.